Seems fair to me.
Yes, it did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Unacceptable by any reason.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us. And as you notice, the Blues game starts at 8:30. The NHL wisely decided not to compete with Donnybrook between 7 and 8. Good move on their part. Thanks for joining us, and let's say hello to the panelists seated around the big green table for this edition of Donnybrook, starting with Liberty Vittert, a freelance writer and a teacher at the Olin School at Washington University who's making her debut. And we're so glad about that, Liberty. Thank you so much. Mr. Joe Holleman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He's from the Riverfront Times, and starting Monday, you'll listen to Ray Hartmann on KTRS, the Big 550. And from the St. Louis American, STLmag.com, and beyond, Mr. Alvin Reid. And Liberty, we've read your columns in Newsweek and Fox News website, Market Watch, Post-Dispatch, and we might add there's a little connection between you and the program because your dad, Mark, was one of our founders 32 years ago. So it's nice that you could join us, and we sure appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the Ladue police are now investigating what happened on a parking lot at Schnucks at 170 and I believe Clayton Road. Is it Clayton Road or is that?
Yeah, Clayton Road.
Clayton Road, just a couple of nights ago, when a woman left the store after allegedly shoplifting, fell in the parking lot, dropped what she allegedly had shoplifted, and allegedly hit someone who tried to help her, and then there was an altercation with police. She was shot by a police officer who responded to the scene, and immediately people protested the next day with signs, Black Lives Matter, and one woman said, "To be silent is complicit." And I'm thinking, did the protesters jump the gun by saying that something untoward happened before we actually found out any facts? What do you think about this?
Well, listen, I mean, while we don't know what happened, it doesn't happen every day that some woman gets shot for shoplifting in the Ladue Schnucks parking lot, okay? So at 3 p.m., by the way, this was not at night. So I think there's no doubt that there's something that we don't understand here. You know, when something seems this strange, there's something we're not understanding. So I think it's absolutely right that protesters are out there drawing in eyes to the issue, wanting to raise the issue, wanting to make sure that there was no issue here, or if there was, to protest it. I think being silent is complicit is very fair. Being silent means nothing happens and no one looks into it.
Well, I don't think that nothing was happening. I think it was being investigated. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a matter of as if other police hadn't responded. I would feel a little bit better if there were body cameras. I mean, here we are almost 5 years after Michael Brown, and police officers still don't have body cameras, although we believe there's surveillance video. But I think when you say complicit, that means something wrong happened, and maybe there was some bad behavior by the police officers. And it just seems to me that in recent cases, whether it's the cemetery in University City, where we thought it was anti-Semitism and it wasn't, or the Jesse Smollett case, or other recent cases, I think we're jumping the gun before the facts come out.
Well, before the facts came out, there was no identification of the woman who was shot. I think most of the people, being honest with themselves, immediately concluded that this woman was black, okay? And if you conclude that the woman was black, then you might want to then take it a step farther and say, like, my only question is this. The man who just spread terror throughout the Catholic supply store and murdered someone had to be taken forcibly by the police, and he was not shot. And thus, if somebody is shoplifting in the Ladue Schnucks parking lot, ends up shot, how much more of a threat to the police could this woman have been as opposed to this man? So we don't know, but at the same time, I would immediately say, like, as I said with other cases, I'm sorry. I think if you change the subject of the suspect, I think you change what happened. I think if it's a 30-year-old white woman, she's not shot if she does the exact same thing, whatever happened out there. Now, I don't have any proof.
But we don't know.
But I'm not saying that. But Charlie, what I'm saying is For me to come to that conclusion, I might be wrong, but I could still come to that conclusion.
Well, and it is not my custom to agree with someone named Vittert on this show, but in this particular case, there's nothing wrong with the activists making a statement that says Black Lives Matter, and they haven't. It isn't like the Black Lives Matter, protesters precipitously called for somebody to be, fired or made a judgment while this investigation. And let's face it, we have no facts. Right. But one fact we do have, and you touched on it, of all the police departments that might be able to muster the resources to have body cameras, it's a little hard to imagine that why the Ladue Police Department, of all police departments, can't afford body cameras, which, by the way, protect good cops. And so I think it is a real interesting tangent to the story, no matter what unfolds with this investigation, that the Ladue Police Department doesn't have body cameras.
And I had one more conclusion that I've already come to. This police officer will be cleared of any wrongdoing when it is all said and done. I have
now there would be the first jump to a conclusion. There was no evidence. I agree. It's not my habit to agree with Ray Hartmann, but I will say the idea that they showed up on a scene, Black Lives Matter, to bring attention to it. I'm never going to oppose a peaceful protest anywhere. I mean, that's your right to show up and do that. I think that what we have to do is wait until the investigation is over. If it was something that was racially motivated, whatever the case would be, yes, I don't think you can make conclusions as to exactly what happened. The idea for protesters to show up, sure.
What exactly is being protested, though? Because after all, they were looking into it. I mean, they had the county prosecutor on the scene, the chief of police for the county there. It wasn't like it was being ignored. So do they show up for all crimes and say, hey, look into this case, and they have signs?
I think it's safe to say
it's the presumption that something wrong happened before the facts were released.
Charlie, the person was shoplifting. I mean,
but we don't know what happened.
There's going to be a big question about this, that there's going to be people really trying to figure out what's happening.
But we don't know. I mean, we don't know if there was an altercation between the individual and the police officer. Maybe the woman was grabbing the officer's weapon. Who knows?
Well, but what I'm saying is that, one, I don't think somebody shoplifting is grabbing an officer's gun, but maybe she did. Maybe she did. But, like I said before, I think it is just a reality that whatever happened, I don't think if it was a white woman, she wouldn't be shot.
Well, and Charlie,
let me say this. There are a ton of shoplifters, I'm sure, at that store, and this is the first one that we know that was shot. So I'm assuming, without any facts yet, that something extraordinary happened. Otherwise, the person probably wouldn't have been shot.
Okay, well, that is an assumption you're welcome to make. An assumption other people are welcome to make is to take 2 or 3 elements of the story. An African-American woman, an officer-involved shooting, and the African-American woman is the shootee. Okay, so they're going to, that's the beginning of what seems to be
your prejudice.
There is a national
you prejudge the case
with African Americans being on the receiving end of officer-involved shootings. It does not mean that everyone is an unjustified case.
Actually, the Washington Post looked into it, and it's a fraction of the overall shootings. Whites are much more likely.
Okay.
It doesn't matter whether it's an African-American woman or a white woman. The thought that somebody got shot for shoplifting in the Schnucks Ladue parking lot is a problem.
We're not saying the person was necessarily shot for shoplifting. It's something that happened after the shoplifting.
And I'm not prejudging. I didn't say the Ladue police did anything wrong. We don't know what happened. I'm saying you're asking why Black Lives Matter's there, and I'm saying because of those elements of the story, if being an officer-involved shooting and a black person that got shot, that's why they're there.
Well, and on a practical level, if you are an organization whose main goal is to look into black people being shot by white police officers, yeah, of course you show up. I mean, I just don't get where the idea of showing up, and we're not talking about blocking traffic or anything. No. We're talking about they showed up and they held some signs.
Right.
All right.
Good for them.
Hey, Alvin, I want to ask you about Harry Ham, longtime film and theater reviewer for KMOX Radio, who was arrested and charged last Friday with incest, child sodomy, and viewing child porn. The county prosecutor, Wesley Bell, would like him held without bail so that he could be held in jail without the opportunity to go free, not go free, but to spend some time before he faces his day in court. Should he be held in jail, or should he be held in some other circumstance?
Well, you know, allegedly he did some horrific things. I could understand how you just set astronomical bail and say if you make it, then you know you have to wear the ankle bracelet and stay in your house. I don't have a problem with that. I don't necessarily think he has to not be granted bail. Whether or not he's a threat to, you know, society, I don't think he'd be walking around the streets anyway. I think maybe he might be a greater threat to himself, and maybe that's what Wesley Bell is concerned about, to see to it that he is prosecuted. But I don't have a problem if they set bail.
Well, the question is, where would he be safer, in the county jail or at home?
I'm sure he would be held in seclusion if he were in jail.
Like I said, what would be safer?
Well,
given the recent deaths at the county
good
jail,
point.
right?
Good, excellent point.
And given what he's charged with, I mean, it's a very dangerous thing to be charged with, frankly. I mean, we don't know. Again, we got entitled to the presumption of innocence. I think that one could go either way. This is we're talking about, I'm sure, I would guess Class A and Class B felonies. It's not uncommon because of flight risk. And the two things that judges, and we had an argument last week about this, the judges have two basic considerations. One is a question of public safety, which is this person likely to commit this crime, you know, in this, and I'm kind of guessing that's not a high likelihood in this case. And then the second one is flight risk, which you could make a case that there's a big one here. And so I don't know. I could go either way on that point. It's a very different distinction. I will say this, if somebody bailed him out and something happened, unlike with the bail project, no one would blame the person who bailed him out. So that's
I think they would.
Yeah, they would.
No,
they would. No, that was a free shot. I can't let you. Of course they would. Yeah, absolutely they would.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't believe how you can say
And by the way, this wasn't a Class A
If
misdemeanor.
you bail out Harry Ham and Harry Ham commits a crime, you will hear about it.
No, you won't be in the news like
Well, maybe it would because he's a high-profile
Right. Yeah.
person.
Otherwise you
because a lot of people bail a lot of other people out. They go straight out and commit another crime, but nobody rummages through it to see, like, hey, your brother-in-law bailed you out.
I think this is a tortured path to get back to you making your point from last week about the bail project.
I would say last week was the first time the bail got.
Joe, I want to ask you about a development in the Title IX legislation in Jefferson City. We have talked in the past that there is an effort led by David Stewart, the founder of Worldwide Technologies, to revise the way sexual misconduct proceedings are adjudicated on Missouri campuses. Right now, the accused does not have the due process that he, sometimes she, would have in criminal courts outside of a campus. Well, it turns out that the whole measure was put forward by not a lawmaker, but a lobbyist whose son was expelled by Washington University. And now some are saying that the whole movement to reform has been tainted because, oh, look, you see, they're working on behalf of the son. Do you see problems here?
Yes, I see problems in the sense that do I believe that the revelation of this fact could indeed scuttle some what I believe are needed changes in Title IX procedures? Yeah, I do. So from the pure process point, I think that when this comes out and the way it is, well, this person's just defending their own son and so on and so forth, yeah, I believe it could hurt chances for much needed fixes. I also, however, believe in the original get-go that the state should wait for the federal government to make the changes on the Title IX program and take the lead from there. So it's kind of a mixed bag of where I'm at.
Well, you're right about that, but the reason the state wasn't waiting for the federal government, as it should, to deal with this pendulum, with the Obama administration taking it one way and Betsy DeVos wanting to take it another, and there are reasonable civil liberties issues there. The reason they didn't is there was not, this was legislation introduced with bad intentions. If you look at its original form, which is the one that went to the House and the Senate, which was drafted basically with his lobbyist, it would not only have affected his son's case, because it would have gone back in time. It would have gone retroactively, but it would and as some of these provisions are still there, this Administrative Hearing Commission that has no business involved in this issue which happens to have this guy's wife on it.
Without a
this
doubt,
guy's kid was going to go before a 3-judge panel that included his mother and one of the and a lawyer
she
who
would have
testified.
recused herself, Ray,
Well,
in this proceeding. He would never have been in front.
The whole bill.
That's just a red herring that
it is
people
not
are making
the
up.
whole bill was the state bill I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the reasonable differences of opinion. The whole state bill, which was an attack on institutions such as WashU and Mizzou, was designed to make it virtually impossible to bring a Title IX claim.
I think that's a gross overstatement. Virtually impossible.
If you went through, it was almost they went to the level of actually making Title IX administrators swear under sworn testimony to talk about their biases. I mean, it was really a bad bill.
We're getting away from the point. Okay. The point is whether this guy, the fact that his son had this happen to him, changes the legislation. I think the fact that he didn't say anything about his son is actually a good thing. He was protecting his son. He doesn't want to throw his son to the wolves, which is what is going to happen when this son gets revealed. And I also think that, people bring legislation for all sorts of reasons, for justice, when they're going for some justice. So I don't think it taints it at all that he's bringing this
I didn't say it tainted it.
Because of his circumstance.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that point. I think all I was doing was addressing the question was, will these revelations hurt the changes? Yes, it will, because now what you've done is you've given the opposition this underhanded sort of scenario that they can say, this is tainted. And once you say something is tainted, it's almost in the political realm as good as tainted.
Well, actually, the opponents that were quoted really weren't opponents. They were fellow Republicans who said, like, I got a little problem with this. It's kind of hard to bring forth. I just think that on college campuses, okay, you're operating a still in your dorm room. You're getting too many fights. Just where the university says, like, dude, thanks, but no thanks. Bye. And nobody would say anything. Man, he's a troublemaker, whatever.
There's a problem with that.
But
there's a problem with that, Alvin.
Let's somebody gets accused of sexual assault, and we got to do backflips to make sure it's like we can't throw them out. I think that's proper.
Here's what happens.
They're not throwing anybody in jail.
No,
they're not
he's getting expelled. Here's what happens, though, Alvin. You got to understand that in this case, the expelled student has difficulty going to another school because that record, by law, has to follow him, and then he has to explain what happened there, and the court doesn't give him due process. And I think that's why even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said in an Atlantic Magazine article, there is no due process for these college kids.
I agree with that.
And by the way, and your arguments have validity. I'm not saying they don't.
I'm talking about this bill. I'm not talking.
Well, the bills change. All bills change.
No. To be clear, the point is, I rarely see the bill drafted this. I mean, it was really awful.
That's
and the point
why
is,
they go through hearings and revisions and conference committees.
And it lays, but the point is, it was unnecessary, in addition to the fact that the state jumped the gun. And there is a really important debate to be had, and there are some serious civil liberties issues at the national level. I'm not arguing that. My point is,
not helping it.
No, I'm not. What wasn't helping it was a bill that would have effectively, completely.
Look, the question to me is this.
Do
you believe that we have a system of justice that provides due process to the accused? Do you think that a lawyer should be able to represent someone who's accused, like Atticus Finch represented Tom Johnson? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right, so we don't have that.
But that's not the same as what this bill did.
A lot of good that did him, huh?
Well, it's not what says what this bill did.
Okay. Now
we're going to bring this back to today, right?
Let's take a quick break and mourn the loss of one of our contributors, Dennis D.J. Wilson, who wrote for the Riverfront Times and St. Louis Magazine, and he also was a host on KDHX. Collateral Damage was his much listened to program. Passed away last weekend after a long and brave battle with cancer. And Alvin, Reid, I got to tell you, you sat next to him and we had some great debates, and he always had a lot of knowledge about St. Louis, which I think we're going to miss a lot.
Well, Thomas Crone had a great obituary for him in the Riverfront Times, and one of the things he said, he was always, when you say somebody was the smartest guy in the room, DJ was the smartest guy in the room, and he never really let on, but just a great guy. Just a quick story. It was Jim Shrewsbury was running for re-election against Louis Reid the first time, and we were there covering that. And Jim Shrewsbury was supposed to win by double digits. We both drinking a Budweiser, just waiting for the victory speech. And he walks out, and he just has this, pale look. And we looked at each other and said, he lost. Well, months later, the school board elections with Jim Buford and some of the others, and they were supposed to win big, and they shockingly lost. And after that, we said, like, hey, if you and I show up at your victory party, you better read those numbers. Just a great man, a great father, you know, had adopted kids, had just I mean, everything that you really want to say about just a gentleman, a scholar, and a really caring person were all wrapped into one, a DJ. And I really miss him already.
He sure was. I mean, he really was. As lucky enough to have him work for us at the Riverfront Times, and the only thing I would say that was higher than his intelligence was his integrity. He was an absolute, just could not have had a better, you know, moral compass. And he was for just a long time a host on KDHX, and then he had a very good career at East West Gateway. So he really. And a father of 8, just a fine guy.
Yeah, I recently reread one of his pieces from your paper in 2000, and it was on the Super Bowl that year, and it was so detailed and in depth, the likes of which we don't see every day.
I was there.
DJ.
That we hung out all that week, and I really remember, you reminded me of that. Super Bowl week, we just kind of hung out because we were the two kind of like, you know, I was with the American, he's with Riverfront Times, and we were down there not to really cover the football game itself, but just more what was going on.
You must have been in the Jacksonville locker room. You and DJ. Joe?
I didn't know DJ as well as some of you. Lifelong South Sider, and talked to him on occasion, and nothing but pleasant. But one of my coworkers, Roland Close, worked with him at the Riverfront Times. And Roland, you know, went on, and you always talk about accomplishments, and you did this and you did that. And then you let people go through that, and if that's all they have to say, it's like, okay. But Roland said, you know, and he was just a really great guy. And he said the thing about him was there would be people who liked DJ who hated each other, but both agreed that DJ was a good guy. And I'm not sure there's higher praise.
I think you're right.
Rest in peace.
He will be missed. Rest in peace. All right, Ray, I want to ask you about Greg Keller, who turns out to be the mystery man. We had been wondering on this program and throughout the greater St. Louis area who was funding the letters written in legalese to municipal mayors, asking them to provide volumes and volumes of information to show us what they were saying about Better Together. And it looked like a real attempt to stifle debate and public discussion, dialogue about the unification of the city and the county. Turns out it's Greg Keller, who's on the board of the Show Me Institute, run by our colleague Brenda Talent and funded by Rex Singfield, and a longtime Republican. So you think he's kind of like doing the Lord's work by making governments accountable, or is this kind of just litigating to keep people shut up?
Well, if you mean the Lord's work is in Lord Rex, who's normally known as King Rex, yes. No, I would say no one minds asking public official, or nobody should bother in our business, should object if public officials are asked to account for how they spend their money. But it's pretty clear, again, when you look at the motive behind this, certainly there's a hypocrisy element in that Rex Singfield's entire modus operandi is through, as a chess master, playing all these little pieces and all these little citizens groups and all these different kinds of kind of shadowy organizations carrying out whatever particular agenda, in this case, Better Together. And so I think it's quite hypocritical that they would be the ones providing this public transparency.
I'm shocked to find out now that apparently money is involved in this whole Better Together thing. Let's quit being so sanctimonious. We're going to say that because it's the money behind Better Together that's doing this. Who's supposed to do that? The enemies of Better Together and people without money? Of course, it's money versus money. The people who are far better together, which I have said is a good plan in general that needs some changes. Okay? You've got one side and you've got the other side. Don't tell me that the opposition isn't also looking at the money side of it, that these people trying to protect their little fiefdoms and all the money and power that go with it, that they also aren't looking out for their best interest. Better Together, where you're at on it, has always depended on whose ox is getting gored. There's too many politicians involved for it to be about anything else.
Alvin, do you consider Kirkwood a fiefdom?
Well, I was just going to get to that. So, like,
that's
wait
where
a minute.
the big fiefdoms.
It's a great place to live, too.
What's getting lost is it's just the average county citizen is being trampled over. Look, we love living in Kirkwood, and people love, Webster Groves and all the other municipalities, be they north, south, whatever. But as a group, this is not about your individual municipality. This is about having the state suspend, take away, just like I said, trample your rights. And anybody in any form who is helping with that, I think, needs to face some opposition. Now, if this gentleman wanted to just say, like, hey, I got some money, this is what I'm going to do, but once again, it's all kind of cloudy and shadowy.
Why didn't he announce himself?
Just on day one.
To correct Joe,
Yes.
the reason to be against
10 seconds, buddy.
There's a lot of reasons about about the voters having rights and other things.
On this show, I said I believe it should be a local vote.
Let's
Right?
go to the
that.
mailbox and see what the viewers had to say about last week's show. Dale Cannon wrote, through grade school, junior high, and high school, school would start the day after Labor Day in some districts or the Monday after in others. So what's the big deal now? Thanks, Dale, for your letter. We heard from Tim King of Fenton, who wrote, I've yet to hear an explanation that makes me think Don Marsh did anything wrong. I must be getting old. Thank you, Mr. King. John Anderi of St. Peter's. Well, I was going to comment on the Don Marsh story, but I was afraid someone would be triggered by what I had to say, so I shall refrain. And we heard from Bill Mole of St. Louis. My most sincere condolences to the Donnybrook crew and the entire KETC 9 Network staff on the passing of Jack Gelmish. Thanks, Bill. You can write us care of KETC, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, letters at ketc.org, and those tweets, hashtag DonnybrookSTL. You can also listen to us and watch us on podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, TuneIn. And thanks so much to Liberty Vittert for making her debut. Thank you, Joe Holleman, for joining us. And stay tuned, everybody, because those tweets and your phone calls are next with Your Turn, hosted by Alvin, Reid, and Ray Hartmann. Go Blues!
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey there, Alvin Reid, Ray Hartmann on Your Turn, and there's a joke in the business. How do you know that you've made it as a print journalist? You start doing a lot of radio and TV. You got a new radio gig, huh?
Well, yeah, and I should mention, Charlie was nice enough to mention KTRS. It's with Jay Kanzler. I will be assisting Jay, much like I'm assisting Mr. Reid here, in the role of second banana. But we're excited about it. We'll be on 9 to 11 every night on Monday through Friday on KTRS. More important than that, let's go to your calls and hear what's on your mind tonight. Let's go to John from Hazelwood. What's on your mind, John?
Yeah, I have a question related to the Title IX discussion about sexual assault on college campuses. Why is sexual assault on a college campus different than any other sexual assault? In other words, if there's a crime committed, you go. If it's outside a college campus, you go to the police, and it goes through the courts. It seems like if it's on a college campus, the campus administration handles it. Why is this not just a matter of police like any other sexual assault?
Because under Title IX, there's a lot of regulations that cover. Title IX applies to more than just crimes. Okay, so obviously, if there's a criminal act that can be proven beyond a criminal, meets the criminal standard, that would generally be referred to the police. There are a lot of interactions on college campuses that fall far below the criminal standard, but that involve, allegations of misconduct or other unpleasantness that would be, while not a crime, subject to campus discipline. And that's really where this comes in more cases than not.
Mm-hmm. And John, let me give you an example here. The National Football League has a policy where you could find yourself in a situation that something happens and you are not charged with a crime, but they reserve the right to suspend you, all right? And it's kind of the same way on a college campus. They reserve the right to put forth some punishment. Right. Now, the process, how you get there, that could be discussed or adjudicated, but I think the university, personally, I think they always have the right to judge everybody individually and say, like, okay, we have come to the decision that you need to move on. And I think a college should always have that right, and that's my fear of legislation and things like this that do not take away the college's right to tell somebody you need to go to college someplace else.
Does that make sense?
Well, a little bit. I mean, it seems to me that in this particular case, if it's a sexual action. If it's not a crime, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're not supposed to drink on campus, that's maybe not against the law, but maybe you can kick somebody off for that. Maybe you're right, but it just seems to me that you're talking about issues where people don't have representation. Well, if it's representation you're talking about, that to me is a court matter. If you need representation, it's a matter that should go to the court. I don't know. The due process,
the due process issues. No one's denied their day in court. If somebody's accused, if somebody takes a case to the police, obviously there's no civil liberties issue. The defendant has the right to defend himself and have cross-examination. This is about actions or allegations that fall below the criminal standard. So, right. But thank you for the call. We do appreciate it, John.
We're going to Ed in Chesterfield. Hi, Ed.
Good evening, gentlemen. My question is in the same area. And I guess maybe you answered it somewhat, but my question is if you have a female student that gets either molested or raped, do they give up their right to go directly to the police and press charges? Because if it happened to my daughter, I wouldn't mess around with the college. I'd go directly to the police and press felony charges against the perpetrator.
All right, most of the, if you were assaulted on campus, the first investigating body is the campus police. Right. And, they're probably great, but we're starting with the campus police. Then we're moving on to the whatever town you're in police, and then we're moving on to the prosecutor. It's not about, as far as the college is concerned, it can be about the allegation. This is not saying you're committed a crime, you didn't commit a crime, but let's look at the circumstances and let's look at both stories, and then maybe we can decide. Right. Not saying it's right or wrong or anything like that, but I don't want to take away the right of the college to decide who can and who can't go to their college.
Well, and also understand, a responsible college, and colleges like Washington University are responsible, and they are concerned about the welfare of their students and fairness to all students. I mean, keep in mind, the colleges don't have some ulterior motive why they want to get rid of students. They're trying to have students. I mean, they're not trying to get rid of people. And yes, if something rises to a criminal standard, I think it's the obligation, and I think you'll find colleges would make that referral. But there are a lot of cases that fall under the issue of discipline. And at some point, part of this discussion has to be, if you entrust your child's education to the University of Missouri or the University of Kansas or Washington University, you have to trust to some extent the disciplinary processes and judgments of those schools. And so that's an element of this. There's a lot of different nuances to this. As an example, at the national level, the Obama administration swung the pendulum pretty far. One of the things the Obama administration did was include off-campus incidents involving 2 students as something that a university that received Title IX funding had to investigate. That's one of the things they're trying to reverse now with Betsy DeVos. Well, I happen to think Obama was right on that point. There's a lot of issues here, but at the end of the day, it's not cut and dried, and it's not all about a crime versus no crime. There's a lot of gray area, and I think Alvin's got a good point that you do have to have some trust in, and you got to have some respect for the university's right to govern its own discipline.
Right. And if I'm the coach, I'm the athletic director, and one of my players is charged or accused of sexual assault, regardless of how that turns out, I don't think they're playing for me anymore. And nobody would have any problem with that. Okay? Title IX, whatever. You say like, no, it's just you just didn't want him on your football team. Well, can't the college say, I don't want him or her on my campus?
Right. And it's an interesting issue.
Right. Clifford in Sunset Hills. Hi, Clifford.
Gentlemen, you're at your best as usual.
You're very kind.
I'm referring to the Keller issue and the Attorney Hatfield issue regarding Better Together. I live in a community that I expect my administrators to keep me apprised as to what is taking place that would impact us locally. I think that's their responsibility, and it's a dereliction of duty to do otherwise. And so I recognize the fact that we have 85% of the world's practicing attorneys, and so they need to have something to do. And usually it all hinges on money issues, but I really think that this is an effort to silence and intimidate the citizens who are really concerned about the future of their community. And so I really feel, again, that this is an attempt to silence.
I agree with you. And by the way, I said I don't have a problem with somebody asking for an accounting of how public monies are spent. We didn't really finish the conversation. In fairness to Joe, he is concerned about the lack of local autonomy on this, which a point he made to me as we get out there. But also, I think it's a legitimate expenditure of public monies if you are looking at how Better Together's proposal affects our community. I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Keller that it's somehow horrible for Kirkwood or other cities to look at this issue and discuss it and be worried, oh my gosh, we better not have public money as part of the discussion. Because I do think this, when you're talking about affecting the existence of these cities, they do have the right for this to be something that's discussed publicly.
Yes. Well, the one point of it all, the police department.
Right.
For your mayor, your city council, your city government to not use its resources to point out to you, listen, we are taking a stand against this primarily because it would affect our police department. There is no way you could tell me that that's some violation of the law. I agree with you, Clifford. That's dereliction of duty.
Right.
You have a responsibility to tell your people this is what is proposed. This is why we're taking a stand for it or taking a stand against it.
And even if they don't take a stand, I mean, this is something that needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
And the idea that, well, we can't have any public resources involved in this discussion is ridiculous.
Or we're going to vote next week to have a non-binding that we're totally against this. It's fair to put that on the agenda and tell the people that's what we're going to discuss.
It's governance.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Carol from Overland. What's on your mind, Carol?
Hi, Carol.
Hi, good evening. I have a few comments about the shooting in Ladue and the Black Lives Matter. First of all, I agree that all of a sudden everybody assumes that this is an African-American female that was shoplifting. I don't know why that is the reason why people should think that way. It could be anybody, that female that was shoplifting. But the thing about Black Lives Matter, I was watching the Ladue police officer, and he was saying that the reason why they don't give out a lot of details is that this time right now, they aren't through with investigating. and there might be witnesses that they can contact and haven't contacted yet. But by seeing so much information on the news, it could maybe inhibit their memory of what actually happened. And I don't believe on anything like this that the police department is going to keep anything hidden. I just would hope that if things work out, that the police officer, if she was in danger and she did what she felt that she had to do to help keep herself alive, that Black Lives Matter will come back out and say, well, we're sorry we jumped the gun, and we're saying that this was just because the woman was African American. I watched religiously a program on A&E, and it's called Live PD, and you would be amazed at how many shoplifters they are of so many colors and nationalities.
I understand that. But Carol, let me ask you a question real quick, okay? When you first read the story, all right, when you first heard of this, if I presented you with check the box, what race was the person who was shot, and you had to check a box, would you have selected that this was a black woman?
Well, I can honestly say I'm on the fence there because I've seen so many other people that have been involved with shoplifting of different nationalities.
I understand that, but we're talking about shot by the police. A woman was shot by the police. Okay. Check a box. Okay. You know, black, white, Asian. What would you have checked?
Well, she might have.
I would have put none of the above.
Okay, well, that's fair.
All right.
That's fair.
And I believe you. I'm just asking.
That's fair. But I would say this. You mentioned that we could kind of count on the Ladue police to do a good investigation. We've had this conversation. What was it about last week? Some organization investigating itself.
That was St. Louis Public Radio.
Well, we're talking about that. Most. Well, I don't remember. Yeah. But the point being, the idea that we can just sit back and assume that the investigation by a police department of one of these incidents is going to be impartial is a little bit of a jump into an assumption. We in fairness to them, I do not blame the Ladue Police Department for not coming forward with information piecemeal until they've done their investigation. Right. And as I want to say on the air, I'm not accusing them of anything, but I think that, have they not established that the person who was shot was a person of color?
I think so.
And so, but let's wait and see, and let's be fair to them.
And let me add this. I have no idea what the color of the police officer was.
Right.
I'm not assuming that the police officer was white.
Exactly.
Now, I might be assuming that the person that was shot was black. Right. I have no idea.
And there have been a lot of Black Lives Matter cases involving the officers who were themselves persons of color.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no question. But we do appreciate it, Carol. You raised some great points, and we appreciate that. And let's go to the Twitterverse 2. Kensky 5. The problem with figuring out guilt or innocence in sexual assault cases is that in most cases it's he said, she said. There's rarely any corroborating witness or evidence.
Okay. And Captain Weil, jumping to conclusions has become the new normal, whether it be activists or news media. Miss the old days of waiting for the facts. Hashtag Donnybrook STL. Send us one.
Interesting point.
Mike, South County. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Alvin. I called a couple of weeks ago and disagreed with you about Jordan Bennington, that whole stuff that was in the news and everything.
Okay.
And I just wanted to call this. I just wanted to call this week and say, and I knew this because I've agreed with you all along on being against Better Together, that whole thing. So I just want to call and let you know that I agreed with you. Not that it makes any difference to you.
Oh, Mike.
What was?
I just wanted you to know that.
All right. That's not Mike. What was your position on Jordan Bennington? Because that's more important.
It wasn't good or bad.
Talk about that right
it's
now
what he had said.
I don't even know what he said. Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought the timing of it
was suspicious. I agree.
Really hokey.
Right. But Mike, seriously, this is why we get along so well on this show and why this show has been on the air 30 years. We disagree, but disagree with love and respect, and I feel that coming from you, and I really appreciate that. But you didn't feel you shouldn't feel the need to call in and say that you just agree with me because we disagreed the last time. But I really do appreciate it. And hey, man, we love all you guys. So thank you so much, Mike.
And
Thank you. Enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Jordan Biddington is 12 wins away from being the front runner in the next mayoral election.
But he might be county executive.
Thank you, or whatever.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go. I don't know where he lives. Let's go to Mike from the city. Mike, calling from St. Louis. What's on your mind?
Hey, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Hey, listen, I have to disagree with Carol. You just had on the phone before, and I'm going to be honest, okay? I'm going to put it out there. I'm a 36-year-old white male, and, I mean, I shoplifted when I was a kid. I mean, I think a lot of us did. I shoplifted, but thank God I wasn't shot because now I'm a family man. Now I have, life ahead of me. And whether it was a black woman or a white woman that got shot, I mean, how much money could she have taken? She didn't rob an armored car. She wasn't stealing your money, my money. And she got shot by whether it was a woman, black woman, white woman, whatever. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is it was wrong. And I hope that people say there's a certain line. I mean, she could have grabbed her left hand and grabbed her stun gun and stun the lady. She could have, get her baton, whatever, mace gun, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do something before you pull that pistol and shoot it. I don't care if she was a 13-year veteran or what. The fact is, it was wrong, and she should not be a cop no more, and that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
I think we got to maybe wait for the facts to come
right, because I don't know what happened.
We really don't know what happened.
But
I mean, we don't know.
Right.
But
and I'm going to show my age here. I remember Jack Webb said one time on Dragnet, and I was a kid watching the show, and he was telling a young officer, he said, like, every time you pull that gun out your holster, you better take some of your guts out with it, because that's not what we're here to do. Right. And there are situations where you have to kill people, and whatever happened on that parking lot, it may be a situation where she felt as though she had to kill that woman.
Right.
But from what we know now, I'm not there.
Well, like I said, I'm at the point where I'm fine with people raising the consciousness, having their signs. Let's wait. And that's it. We may, when the investigation comes in, somebody might want another investigation. I've always think I feel like these things need to be independently investigated.
Every single one of them.
And I said it during the Darren Wilson thing. I think that when there's an officer involved shooting, the investigation needs to be done by something other. Ultimately, particularly if there's a prosecution, needs to be from at least 2 counties away. Okay, so that's not to disparage anybody in Ladue or anywhere else. You need the perception of independence, but I do think it's too quick to rush to any judgment.
I agree
about the officers.
I agree 1,000%.
I can't agree on that. I think it's too early to make any accusations about this officer.
Absolutely.
So let's go to Sally from House Springs. How you doing? How's House Springs?
Hi.
It's wonderful here. I first of all wanted to say I watch every Thursday night.
Thank you.
With my husband John.
Hi.
And whenever I see Kurt Warner's picture, I'm like, yes, keep it there. Do not take it down.
It's not moving, okay?
That was our 15 minutes of fame. We loved it.
All right.
You bet.
So we take that down. I called because of the Schnucks parking lot thing. I'm sorry that happened. I just wish the shooting would stop, no matter what color you are. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you if you're going to steal something, I mean, it's sad because if you got to, stoop that low. But I don't think that we should be so hasty to shoot somebody, but at the same time, we don't know exactly what happened.
I agree.
I was really kind of upset because I heard you, Alvin, say kind of compare it to, well, if the guy that was at the Catholic supply store would have, they would have, they wouldn't have shot him. But I think that was a little different circumstance because they found him at home because of good police detection. But if he would have came out and they would have known that he was the one that did it, they would have shot him, I think.
Sally, I hear you. And to a degree, I agree with you. But here's the thing. he was suspected in horrific crimes, and he put up a fight against the police, okay? I mean, knocked down, drag, had a big old black eye. They said they had to mess him up arresting him, but he was not shot. Now, I'm not comparing the two things. I'm just saying it went down without him being shot. The woman who was shot in the Ladue parking lot could have been doing something that led to her being shot. I don't know, but she's shot and he's not. So we have to
it's not an everyday occurrence.
It's not, right. This is kind of bizarre.
But thank you.
But
thank you for the call, Sally.
And that's a good call, great call.
And one thing, as long as we're talking about crimes, it should be noted that when Bernie Federico was caught on security cameras breaking into our studio and putting up a photo of his Hall of Fame self, he did not in any way touch the Kurt Warner photo or any others. So there was no allegation of anything missing.
Right.
But,
I will add this. If the police are going to arrest you for any problem, be you black, white, whatever, don't resist arrest. Okay, just get arrested. Okay, you'll live.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
All right, who's next?
JR in South County. Hi, JR.
City.
Oh, I'm sorry, South City.
Good evening. I'm going to play Columbo tonight.
All right. One of my favorite shows ever.
Now, there's only two possibilities in this case, in the shooting in Ladue. Number one is the police officer shows up and sees a black woman and decides, hey, this is my chance to shoot a black person.
Disagree. Totally disagree. Totally disagree. So what's the other side?
And number two is they wrestled over the gun. The woman was trying to take the officer's gun.
That's North and South Pole. Right.
Maybe somewhere in the middle, JR. Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Wait, listen, there's only
two. Those two possibilities, right?
What's the third?
We don't know. Like I said, you got the Arctic and you got the Antarctic.
Right.
And there's a whole world between there.
If I may speak from the political level, I think the odds that the woman said, oh, gee, this is my opportunity to shoot a black person, I'd kind of rule that one out on behalf of the police.
Right.
I mean, and as I say, we should not prejudge the Ladue Police Department, with the exception of wondering why they don't have body cameras. But we should not prejudge them. I'm not going to do that. But I do think that we have to let the evidence unfold. And I think there's a lot more than two possible scenarios. Let's go to the Twitterverse. Who's next, Mr. Reid?
JDR 1949. Each week the Donnybrook panel is outstanding, but this old, longtime viewer really misses Bill McClellan. He'll be back soon.
We'll be back.
All right.
Liz Will writes, if our gun laws weren't so lax, I bet our police would be shooting fewer crime suspects. Thank you for that.
Okay. Mert Warson, rule of thumb on Better Together and really any other issue is Rex Singfeld for it. Then I'm against it. All right. Hashtag Donnybrook STL. Running out of time. We're going to go quick. Diane Pagedale, how you doing?
Hi. I rolled up on that protest yesterday.
Okay.
And I shop at that Ladue Schnucks. And I was kind of shocked to see all these Black Lives Matter because these are white folks with these signs.
Okay.
And I said, well, what happened here? Because, see, I know that personally by going to that store that I didn't, we go in there, we don't do that, I don't see security or anything like at some of the other Schnucks. But then you have Ladue police that's sitting on the parking lot. Now, a lady told me who's one of the protesters, they were people from Ladue, and they were concerned about what had happened.
Okay.
And but here's the last thing I want to say.
Right.
They didn't say black. The first word was white. It could have been a white girl, and there was another person with her that happened to be African American.
All right.
Now, I was told it was white and black. That's what I was told.
All right.
Let's say something.
Right, we got you. Thank you, Diane.
We should point out this wasn't a massive demonstration. There were some people holding signs, and it was fine that they were.
Fine.
Let's go to Bill in Bonne Terre. What's on your mind, Bill?
Hey, guys. I have two nieces who are of mixed race.
All right.
And the way they are dealt with by the police is totally different than how my so-called completely white relatives are dealt with. It's just a fact. And I warn them kids that you have to take into account that there is institutional racism in this country. And you have to be careful when you're dealing with authority figures. And that's the reality of it.
All right.
Anybody who denies it is lying.
Okay, Bill, I couldn't have said it better myself.
No,
I mean, you're going to close this out with some wise thought, man.
It is a great, you'll be our last caller tonight, but I have to tell you, I didn't have to have that talk with my kids.
Right. And we all have that talk with our
kids.
That's right. Good night. We'll see you next week. Donnybrook and Donnybrook, your turn. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.